Good afternoon and welcome to today's Trust and Estates webinar, the Quid Pro Quo Destroyer. This webinar is exclusively for subscribers of Trust and Estates. I'm Susan Lipp, Editor-in-Chief of Trust and Estates, and I'd like to personally thank you for being a subscriber. I'll be your moderator today, but before I turn things over to our speakers, let me explain how you could get the most out of this event. To improve your viewing and listening experience, you can move your webcast windows around by dragging on the title bar or resize them by clicking on their lower right corner. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find multiple application widgets. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the green Resource List widget. We welcome questions about our topic and will answer as many as we can following the presentation. But feel free to submit yours to the queue at any time. Just type it into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen and hit the Submit button. The webcast has been accepted for 1 CE credit hour towards the AEP designation program. Instructions for credit submittal are available in the green Resources widget. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. Now let me introduce today's speakers. Craig Hirsch is a wills, trust, and estates attorney with the Freedom Practice. Craig is a board-certified estate planning attorney and national practice development expert at the Freedom Practice in Fort Myers, Florida. And Maria Reimer is team success coach with the Freedom Practice Development Program. Maria works closely with attorneys Craig Hirsch and Michael Hill to bring innovative solutions to the ever-changing legal marketplace. So with that, let's get started. And Craig, I am going to turn the floor over to you.
Hey, thank you, Susan, and thank you for allowing us to be here today. And good afternoon, Maria.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Craig.
Well, we're here in Florida. I guess on the West Coast it still might be morning, so good morning and afternoon to everybody. So what we're talking about today is quid pro quo, and so many of our practices are referral-based, aren't they?
Yeah.
We have, most of the viewers here today will be attorneys, or maybe we might have CPAs or trust officers, financial planners, and we have referral-based businesses, and so much of our referral-based businesses might be based upon things that I refer to you and you refer to me, right, Maria?
Yeah, and you depend on those referrals.
Yeah, we do, and what happens eventually is sometimes a quid pro quo, one thing for another, gets out of balance. So we'll talk about that today a little bit, and we'll talk about maybe that's a mindset thing. It's not so much maybe keeping tabs as it is a mindset thing, and the other part of this webinar that we'll provide to you is some solutions around that mindset, how to get out of this quid pro quo mindset. So how's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds exciting. I know it's a topic that everyone wonders, how do you even out those scales, or how do you make it so that it's mutually beneficial for both parties?
Yeah, exactly. So, well, let's talk about first the origins of quid pro quo. The Latin phrase quid pro quo initially meant that one thing was substituted for another, or is literally defined something for something. And in 1530, early English speakers used a Latin phrase referring to medicines. This was actually a medical type of a term, when one had either intentionally or unintentionally been substituted for another. Now, in Lestrange's 1654 work, The Reign of King Charles, the phrase developed a considerably more positive connotation by referring to a religious expectation of reciprocity for doing something positive in the name of the deity. So that's what quid pro quo comes from. And we all know today, for example, what quid pro quo means. I give you, you give me.
Right.
So, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about quid pro quo. But really, quid pro quo is a vestige of antiquity.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, Craig, if it's something that's, on a positive note, why is that bad? How is that outdated?
Yeah. Well, this has to go with the mindset. I'm going to talk a lot about mindset today, and it's in the sense of a transaction, okay? That if you do something for me, then I do something for you, and life doesn't always work out that way, does it?
No.
And it's even more important today. Back maybe 20 or 30 years ago, before the internet was as popular as it is and had as many resources as the internet has, is that those of us who are attorneys, those of us who are CPAs, financial planners, we were kind of the gatekeepers to information, weren't we?
Yeah.
So it was much more important when you were referring somebody that you were referring to this gatekeeper. But what happens today with that?
Yeah, the problem is that it's not exactly equal, is it? And that's not the way it works, and unfortunately it sets up almost an expectation on a certain level.
Yeah, and because the information is so easily accessed by our clients or potential clients, we're not as special as we used to be anymore.
Right,
In fact, rather than going through a financial planner, I might go through E-Trade, or rather than going through a lawyer, I might go through LegalZoom. So this easily accessed information muddies the water of this quid pro quo. And that's where I'm getting into transactions versus relationships. It kind of muddies the water a little bit in the sense that the transactional mindset is really not the mindset we're after.
Right. And let me ask you a question about that, because this really interests me. How does it become a transactional mindset? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, quid pro quo, one thing for another. So isn't that a transaction? You're saying you give me and I give you.
Right.
So I would say, we do coaching for lawyers who are estate planners. That's a freedom practice. But I would say that so many of our attorneys that come into our program, Maria, wouldn't you agree that everything is a transactional type of a mindset?
Yeah, and to try to break that is very difficult, and they have it in every circle that they kind of encounter, right?
Yeah.
And so and how to break out of that, even sometimes when maybe that's not the best choice, right?
Right. So the first thing we have to do is recognize what our mindset is with regard to quid pro quo. That's transactions. And what we're really after is relationships. Now, today we're not going to talk about relationships with clients, so to speak. But, also when you're talking about a transaction, I'm an estate planning attorney, so we have a practice here in Fort Myers. And when we're not really selling a trust, are we?
No.
A trust is a commodity, isn't it?
Totally.
So we're selling a relationship is really, and I'm not going to get too deeply into that. That's for another time. But nevertheless, we don't want to get into that same mindset when we're talking of our referral sources, our centers of influence.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question. Our firm in particular, right? We probably give out more referrals than we receive. Is that right?
Yeah, and what this slide here is talking about frequency of client interaction. Usually it's the other way around. Now, usually what happens is, at least my experience, I've been practicing estate planning law for almost 30 years now, is that CPAs and financial advisors, they have a stable of clients, right?
Right.
The CPA is going to do the tax returns, and they might be an audit CPA, or they might have business consulting services. But what they have is an ongoing relationship with those clients, and they are actually getting annual revenues from those clients.
Right.
And the same could be true of financial advisors, wouldn't you say?
Right. It's annuitized, more or less. It's the same people. They see the same people year after year.
Yeah. So especially for those financial planners that are not in a transactional relationship where they're charging for their expertise, they're usually charging some kind of a percentage of the assets under management. So they have this stable of clients, and what that means is they don't have to really add that many clients every year, do they?
Right.
But they also have they're seeing these people at least annually, if not quarterly.
Right.
So you would think that CPAs and financial advisors actually have a greater opportunity to refer to estate planning attorneys.
Right. Is that the way it normally works?
Well, I think it might, but here, we probably refer out more.
Yeah.
I think we do to financial planners and CPAs, and we get back in. But yet, that doesn't worry me.
Yeah. And tell us why.
Well, it doesn't worry me because I'm more worried about the relationship and what we're going to do with the relationship and how we can all benefit from relationships. I'm giving you a little teaser, guys, about what we're going to talk about in a few minutes than I am about the quid pro quo.
Right.
So, this goes to this slide, is a balanced relationship necessary? And what I'm going to demonstrate to all of you who are watching or listening is that it's not. It really doesn't matter if I'm referring out 5 and only getting back 1, or I'm referring out 10 and only getting back 2, so long as there is a mutually beneficial relationship going on, and we'll talk about how we might create that. So what we really want are growth and ideas. We want a way to generate clients, and we'll talk about what type of clients. but we want to have growth and ideas that generate clients often outweigh any singular transaction.
Right, right. Well, because ultimately your clients will find tremendous value from that, right? And naturally, how is that going to make you look?
Right. So, if you think about some of your better relationships, you're probably not keeping tabs. My guess is those of you who are out there that your better relationships, you can't tell me, if I were to ask you today, well, how many of you referred out and how many referred into those better relationships?
Exact numbers. Right?
Yeah, if it's 5, 10, what is it? So, and why is that? And that's because you have this ongoing relationship and the clients feel really good about what you're providing to them as a team.
Right.
Right? So when we're talking about a team, then sometimes we get into this.
Right, right. Who is the quarterback, right? Now, out of the things that I see and hear in our firm, I see our centers of influence sometimes struggle with that, right? Who plays the quarterback? Does it turn into some sort of a competition sometimes?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, don't you think there's a little bit of ego involved in that?
Absolutely, and the egos totally come out the second you're in that arena, right?
Yeah, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, I think. We all want to feel like we're the quarterback. And the danger in that is the Maria, don't you think the clients get a sense of that?
They totally do. And then the feeling of he's doing this because this is good for me goes away. So your clients get a sense for these two are they have this unspoken thing going on, and I don't know that I'm necessarily, as the client, the focus of it.
Right.
And that's not a good feeling.
Well, I've had business lunches before where, the financial planner will say to me, well, listen, I'm always going to play quarterback. And, what I'm saying to you, the listener, when you're having that business lunch with your center of influence, whether you're the lawyer or you're the CPA or you're the financial planner, I'm not sure that's the best thing to say.
Yeah.
I always want to play quarterback.
Yeah, because that may not always be the best thing for the client.
Right, and it depends on the relationship. So one of the things, again, this is all going to mindsets is, do we want to make sure that everybody's playing on the same team? And we all realize that the value we create is when we're creating value, we're all creating mutual value. And this is where the sum of several, 1 + 1 might equal 3. There's only so much I can do. I'm not going to provide financial advice.
Right.
And I'm not going to prepare tax returns in most instances. That's going to be the CPA.
No, we're specialists.
So you really want a situation where you have 1 + 1 equals 3. And if one of the parties is trying to play the quarterback all the time, that might be, appropriate in some situations, not in others, then you might have a problem. And again, you don't want that kind of a mindset.
Well, that, and not every center of influence that you work with is right for every single client. Is that right? Or would you think of, I have this one person that I go to all the time, my one accountant guy. Is that right for every single client?
Yeah, I mean, and this sits to this slide here, is oftentimes, we probably have a stable of centers of influence, of other related professionals who we think of when we have a client. You might say, well, this is a single widow client. She might be better served maybe by a female lawyer that she can better relate to than maybe a Craig Hirsch, Or you might have a financial planner, one who's really aggressive and he's outgoing, and that might not be the style of one of your other clients who might be very reserved. They might be turned off by that.
Yeah,
so,
one of the things I love here is when we make referrals, and like you said, we have a stable of many people that we work with within our community. One of the things that I love is we literally disarm that whole idea that I'm doing what's best for me. We give the client 3 different referral names and then let the client decide who you're more comfortable with. And I have to tell you, I love the reaction we get from our client when we do that.
Yeah.
Because they instantly feel like he's trying to do what's best for me. It's not about a relationship that Craig may have on the side here.
Yeah, and you always have to overcome a client concern or presumption that maybe you're getting something back, for the referral. And we all do, in the sense that when we refer things out and we're referring good clients out to others. Again, going back to this expectation, we're going to get something back in return, and the client sense that as well. So if you're giving a few names out and saying, look, these are people who might fit well with you, then I think that improves the client confidence.
Totally.
Yeah. So, excuse me. What did I do here? Oh, wrong one. So now we're going to talk a little bit about this.
Right. So inner circle. Let's talk about Do you ever feel, Craig, like you're trying to break into some private club
Yeah.
of, some private club of financial advisors or private club of accountants? Do you ever feel like there's some inner circle that you just can't seem to break into?
Yeah, well, early in my career, I definitely had this problem. Having practiced now for almost 30 years, I tend to be the inner circle now. Maybe I have an inner circle. But let's talk about this for a moment. Our inner circle, breaking into an inner circle. You have to be careful about this. Like, for example, when I first started practicing law here in Fort Myers, Florida, I developed relationships with a lot of CPAs who are very good referral sources for me, and they provided me some very, very good clients. But as my career went on, and now that I'm about 55, I am 55 years old now, you never know exactly how old you are. Now I'm 55, a lot of these CPAs are 10 or 15 years older than I was when I first broke in. They're all retiring.
Yeah.
So do we have to be careful about this inner circle? It might break down on us, right?
Right.
So I think it's good to have different centers of influence who might have different ages, different skill sets. They might be at different stages in their careers. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, how do you, let me ask you a question. How do you think is the best way to go about that? If there is an inner circle, do you think that it's kind of spread the wealth a little bit, get to know a lot of different circles?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this in just a few slides, but I think a great thing to do at lunch is to ask these questions. So I'm the estate plan attorney, and you can fashion this if you're the financial planner or you're the accountant. Instead of a conversation with your centers of influence that says something to the effect of, this is how great I am, this is what I do, this is how well my practice is, what if you asked them this? What do you find frustrating about estate planning attorneys?
Yep.
What if you asked them that question?
Yeah.
Or, financial planner, what do you find frustrating about financial planners? In other words, how can I help you?
Right. Yeah, I love that question because I think you also get to know, how you can be of service, what their clients are like, right? Which is, it's interesting. It leads us right into the next slide. A lot of experts want to instruct us and tell us what do your clients look like? They want to let you know what your client is. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, a lot of these experts, you'll read these books or you'll read a magazine article, and the expert says what you need to do to make sure that you get the right clients in your firm is you need to, at lunch or wherever, you're talking to your center of influence, say, this is my A-plus client. And, that's really not true, I don't think. I think of this very, very differently. For example, how do I describe my best client, right? So am I describing my best client as net worth over $5 million, they have a nice house in Florida, they might have a house somewhere else? That might be well and true, that might be common to all my clients, but is that really how we should describe our clients?
Right.
So, I think what we need to do is really not describe particular aspects about our client, their net worth, and so forth. They're single, they're widowed, if they're newlyweds, whatever they are. And again, going to mindset. Let's talk about what makes a good client. So I think it's the client mindset. I'd rather have a client that's worth $3 million who has the right mindset than a client that's worth $30 million with the wrong mindset. And what I'm talking about is, do they value me as a relationship, or are they looking just for a transaction?
Right.
What other mindsets are we looking for?
Yeah, I know here in our firm, for us it's important that the client understand the way we work with our systems. The things, the values that we bring, right? That's some of the stuff that we talk about in the freedom practice is our processes in our systems, right? And we want our clients to appreciate them. And so it is about mindset. So now are you proposing that we actually have conversations with our centers of influence about that?
I think we have conversation. In fact, if you want to look at our mindset, we have a client mindset quiz on our website at estateprograms.com, E-S-T-A-T-E programs.com. But in any event, what we're talking about mindset is, have you ever, I'm sure those of you who are out there, you've had questions or you've had conversations where a client wants everything fast and they want it cheap and they want it right.
Right.
When I have a client that's like that, I tell them you can pick
just
two. you give, fast and cheap, it's not going to be right and fast, it's not going to be cheap. That goes to the client mindset. And if for those of you who are interested, you can go to my website. Again, it's estateprograms.com, E-S-T-A-T-E programs.com, or even the forfreedompractice.com website that you see here on the slide. Well, you can find that website from this one. But in any event, if you want to play around and look at client mindsets, we actually have that out there. I think the mindset of the client is so much more important than their net worth or any other attribute about the client.
And going back to the, working with centers of influence, one of the beauties, I think, about educating them as to what we consider the right fit client, I think is it also says something about us, to them. Mm-hmm. It kind of informs them who we're looking for. And, we hope that they then turn around and refer us those people that they can identify as those, with those particular mindsets.
Well, in fact, when you have this kind of a conversation with your center of influence, I think that you might be prompting some thoughts in their mind as well. They might have thought that the best client is somebody with $1 million of net investable assets. But then when you start talking about these mindsets, they might think, wow, maybe I should be thinking about client mindset.
I was going to ask you that. Like your relationship with centers of influence, I'm always fascinated when I've been out to lunch with some of these people that we're trying to, form relationships with, centers of influence. I think the best lunches and the best getting together with these centers of influences happen when you give them value. Yeah. Right? You provide them something they had never thought about.
Right. And that's what we're speaking to here is, when you can help them achieve their goals, again, that goes back to, what frustrates you about estate planning attorneys? Right. Talk to me about that. How does that impede your goals? Those of you who've listened to me before know that I'm in Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach program. Some of you may be in it as well. He has something called the R Factor question, and I would urge you to go read that book. He has the Dan Sullivan question book. And it's basically the question goes, if we're sitting here 3 years from today, looking back to today, what has to happen to make you feel good about your progress? So that's the R Factor question. It's
powerful.
It's a relationship question. Maria, incidentally, is in the Strategic Coach's team success program. And, the neat thing about that is when you turn the conversation to how you can help others, just as you do with your clients, if you do this with your centers of influence, again, we're breaking out of a transaction of a quid pro quo, aren't we?
You totally are, and you're providing value. You are, speaking to each other's mutually beneficial positions. I love that.
Yeah. So value creation is something that we want to try to do. And again, it doesn't speak maybe not just to you and your center of influence, but maybe how do we make them look better to their client.
Right. A story comes to mind, Craig. We had lunch once with a very affluent center of influence here in our area, and I'll never forget, we kind of provided some background information on particular retirement plan trusts that they had never thought about, things that they could offer their clients. Yeah. It was a wonderful lunch, and they walked away. They've since become very good referral base for us.
Right.
But they walked away feeling like you provided me value as to how to best service my client. That's a win-win for me.
Yeah. So, that's your goal. Your goal always is to provide value. And my thought is if you're always providing value to whomever you're in front of, you might be in front of clients, you might be in front of your centers of influence, and the best way to provide value is to ask them, what are you looking for?
Right.
And, the follow-up, by the way, I'll give you guys this too, the Dan Sullivan question, the R Factor question, what do we hope 3 years from today? But then you follow that up with, what dangers or obstacles stand in our way that we need to avoid, because that's really the cannon fodder for the success. What are we going to do to overcome these? What opportunities exist? And those opportunities can speak to what you can offer.
Right.
What you can offer your referral source or even their client base.
And you suddenly become the answer, right?
Yeah, and then what strengths do we have? And when we're talking about strengths, we're talking about what activities we have that might lead to success.
Yeah.
And that's again, overcoming quid pro quo. So let's talk about this. This is a laundry list, and we're going to go into the laundry list
How to transform that relationship, right?
Right. We're transforming. So, these are things, becoming a key resource and describing how your center of influence fits into your process. We'll talk about podcasts and webinars. These are all the things that you can do. This is just my laundry list of activities that you might think about doing to transform that relationship. And by the way, I wrote about this. Susan, of course, is editor-in-chief in Trust and Estates magazine. For those of you, all of you should be subscribers. The article that was the basis of this webinar is in the February 2019 issue, and it's under the Modern Practice, the Quid Pro Quo Destroyer. So you can download the PDF of these slides, and you can go read my article, if you want any more information. But let's talk about one of these at a time. So becoming a key resource. So you see me do this, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was going to say that I think one of the things our centers of influences love is, they can call you, Craig, so they can call you with questions of clients that aren't even our clients.
Right.
They just have a general question. I have this client. I have this situation. What would you recommend? How do you think I should approach this? And I love the fact that you and Mike Hill here in our office make yourselves available to a variety of centers of influence that can call us. Does that take too much of your time?
No, that doesn't take much time at all. And my suspicion is almost everybody listening to this webinar does this occasionally. But here's the question that I want to ask you. Yeah, you might be a key resource to some of your centers of influence, but have you actually told them? Have you actually asked them or said to them, listen, call me about anything. It doesn't have to be about one of our mutual clients. It could be a problem that you're faced with. Because chances are, those of you who are listening and watching today, you subscribe to Trust and Estates magazine, you're probably at the top of your game. You're probably one of the most technically proficient, professionals in your community. That's my guess.
What a resource.
Right. And we all know there's a lot of other professionals that practice that might be your competition that aren't maybe as qualified as you are.
Right.
Right? So, I know I've been stuck in this situation. I've been stuck where I'm working with another professional. The client didn't ask me for the referral. They came to me, and then they already had their financial advisor, they already had their CPA, or even it was another attorney. And the technical level of proficiency of that particular expert wasn't really up to snuff, but we were wondering and working on a problem that I may not have been all that familiar with.
Right.
So guess what I do? I go call one of my centers of influence. I say, hey, I know this isn't a client that we're working on together. Do you mind answering a question? Well, how valuable is that to me?
Totally valuable, and it leaves such a wonderful feeling that this is a resource for me. I can call, and guess what's going to happen the next time you feel like referring? That's a person that pops into your head.
Exactly. So those of you who are already doing this, kudos to you. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing this. Just make it a practice to remind your centers of influence that you're there for them for these sorts of things from time to time.
So how centers of influences fit into your process? I really want you to talk a little bit about this, Craig, because I happen to love, so in the Family Estate and Legacy program, which is our estate planning program, we have it's a 7-step process, and the financial advisor is actually one step in that process.
Yeah, well, not just the financial advisor, any advisor.
Yeah.
Any advisor is one step in the process. So this slide kind of begs a couple questions, all right? Many professionals actually don't have a process that they can point to that this is how I do my estate planning.
Right, and when you say point to, you mean point to the client.
Well, I'm saying even just have a graphic representation of what it is that you do.
Right.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, a lot of financial planners have a problem in the sense that they have compliance departments that won't let them create these sorts of things. But, on the other hand, a lot of these national firms already have processes that they can point to. So I think it's important, and again, this goes a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation, but what I coach my attorneys in my program, I talk a lot about that you don't sell a commodity. You're not selling a will
or a trust.
You're selling a process, okay? So one of the things, if you have a process, I think is very important, is that you actually have a point in the process where you're open to the suggestions of and the input from
outside
advisors.
party, right?
Yeah, for example, here, practicing in Fort Myers, Florida, most of our clients that come to us already have an estate plan put into place, but many of them were from up north,
right.
Cincinnati, Indianapolis, New York, wherever. And the thing about it is those clients have had decades-long relationships with financial advisors, with CPAs, with their attorneys. And one of the worst things I could do is try to disrupt that, right?
Right. And I love, if I can, just give my view of this, I love the reaction of our clients when we say, invite the attorney into a teleconference while we're talking about how we're going to update your estate plan. Literally, our clients are always tickled pink because it doesn't become now you're our client, we won't speak to that lawyer, or we won't speak to that accountant, or we won't speak to that financial advisor. It's, no, we want to do this together because this is someone that you obviously trust, and we want to include them.
And what I want you, the listeners and viewers, to be thinking about with this is when you include those other professionals, aren't they more likely to become part of your center of influence team?
Yeah.
Because you're not trying to play quarterback over them, going back to that concept. We're working as a team to promote the client's interests. So, yeah, I consider the attorneys that have served our clients prior to them moving to Florida, I consider them an integral part of this process.
Absolutely.
And again, provide confidence, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
no. We have clients who have had attorneys up north, for example, and suddenly that attorney that we get to know through that one client is referring us business all the time.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
So here, let's change gears a little bit. So, one of the things you can do is we're conducting a webinar right now. Many of you are starting to create podcast series. In fact, I wrote an article in Trust Estates Magazine, and forgive me, I don't remember which issue it is in, but I guess if you go online and click me as the author, you'll find the one how to create your own podcast series.
Yeah.
So I posted that in Trust and Estates Magazine, so you all can go look for that one. So let's say if you have a podcast series, what's a great idea? What if you interview your centers of influence? What if you say, hey, Charlie or Susan or whoever, this is somebody who's somebody that I work with, and you create an interview and you post it on your website.
And maybe they post it on their website, right?
Yeah.
It's, again, mutually beneficial. And you might be, turning them on to a media that maybe they haven't thought about.
Yeah, and maybe they don't have any expertise in, and again, you can help them create that expertise. Now, the one thing that I point out in this slide is beware of professional compliance and ethical requirements. Again, talking about financial advisors, their compliance departments oftentimes want to have a whole outline of what these podcasts or webinars will say before they approve them, so you want to make sure that you don't run afoul of any rules that you have. Attorneys have to be mindful of their professional ethical requirements in the bar and publishing or saying things. So do kind of brush up before you do this stuff on your own professional requirements, because you don't want to get in trouble with these things. But nevertheless, they're a very, very useful tool.
Absolutely. Now, what about other media? Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Right. I'll tell you what, one of the first things I did when I was a very young attorney, breaking in the field, I wrote an article with Alan Gassman. Many of you may know who Alan Gassman is. He's an attorney in Clearwater, Florida. He writes a lot for the Lineberg Information Services website. He writes a lot for gosh, he publishes books. Alan's a genius. So I wrote an article with Alan when I was a very young lawyer and published it, and I used that article around town to get some notice. And that's how I initially developed my referral network. So here's an idea. Publish an article. Now, Susan Lipp will be happy to tell you how to publish an article in Trust Estates Magazine.
She's actually done a presentation for our Freedom Practice.
She did, and if you attend the Heckerling workshop, Trust and Estates Magazine usually hosts a breakfast, and at that breakfast, Susan discusses how to write an article that can get published in Trust and Estates Magazine. I happen to sit on the editorial advisory board in the Modern Practice section, so I might be one of the parties who's reviewing some of those articles. But boy, that's a great way to get your name out with other centers of influence. But one of the ideas I have here to break through that quid pro quo issue is to how about jointly author something with somebody?
Yeah, I love that idea. and quite honestly, again, you can be jointly talking about, I always talk about that collective intelligence, and when you're both jointly writing something, you're both contributing from a wealth of information of both of your practices, right?
Exactly. Now, what about in-house workshops? In fact, why don't you talk a little bit about that, Maria?
Yeah, so you, Craig and Mike are about to conduct an in-house workshop with a national CPA firm and financial planners about estate planning topics, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be talking about BDITs, BDOTs, OBITs, that hopefully will lead to a lot more business on both of your parts.
Exactly.
Right?
So for those of you who don't know, BDITs is a beneficiary deemed income trust, BDOTs is a beneficiary deemed owner trust, and OBITs, the optimal basis increase trusts. Pretty new concepts in estate planning. Not a whole lot of attorneys know about them. Not a whole lot of financial planners or CPAs know about them. So we were out to lunch actually with some of our CPA centers of influence who work at a big national firm, and we were talking about these things and how this could add benefit to their clients who have continuing testamentary trusts or a client who passes away. And they said, boy, this is an interesting topic. We see how we might benefit from this. Would you mind doing a presentation to our office? Excuse me. And so we are, and it's going to be beamed to several states, I guess.
Right.
We're going to be doing, when is this? Is next week sometime?
I think it's next week, yeah.
And in any event, think about, when you expand your centers of influence and how you can help them. And again, quid pro quo, who cares? I don't care if in fact, I've been referring more to this national firm that they've been referring to us.
Yeah. But you know what? You're also going to have an opportunity to meet the rest of their in-house team, right?
Yeah.
And you never know. And the best part is you're giving them a new capability, right?
Right.
And guess what? I really do believe that once you talk to them about BDITs and OBITs and all of those specialized trusts, I really do think that if they have a question, they will use you as a resource. I think it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, and that hopefully leads to some productive, mutually beneficial relationships. So, again, in-house workshops. And by the way, gang, it's real easy to get things certified for continuing education. You just have to go to the various state boards and get things certified for education. How about this? Joint continuing education workshops. So I've done a workshop with a financial planner. We did a joint workshop for CPAs on various topics that they might find of interest. Again, expanding your network. Now, one of the things that clients will ask me, or other attorneys will ask me and so forth, is won't they see all these other people that you're referring to, and won't they feel like, oh, you already have that click?
Yeah.
If you do a workshop in front of a bunch of CPAs, is that going to actually have the counter effect in the sense that these CPAs will say, well, he's already working with Linda, or he's already working with Jean. What's going to happen there? But here's my take on that. I don't worry about that too much, and the reason I don't worry about that is because ultimately, what these centers of influence are looking for is comfort and care and professionalism, and they're looking for competency. And when they see that, then of course they're gonna recognize it, and you're likely to be on their short list.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the good far outweighs the bad in that situation.
And by the way, the ones that are thinking about, well, he already has his network, those are back in that transactional mindset.
Right.
We don't want to be dealing with people who are back in that transactional mindset. It's always better to be working with people who have the same type of mindset that you have, which is a relationship mindset. And by the way, that also goes to a concept of, are you in a scarcity mindset, or are you in an abundance mindset? Believe me, everyone listening here, I'm sure there is more than enough business for all of us.
Right. I always love when you say that, because honestly, it's so true. There's more than enough business. It's not like, clients are going to run, you're going to saturate a certain area. We all have specialties. We all have types of clients. And again, speaking to what is the mindset of the client that you specifically are looking for. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and so, if you're in that abundance mindset, you're not going to worry too much about doing the things that might upset one or two of your referral sources, because ultimately those aren't probably your best referral sources anyway. Another obvious workshop that you can conduct would be a joint client workshop, one where you're you're both trying to get clients or potential clients in, and rather than it just being a legal workshop, or rather than just being a tax workshop, or rather than just being a financial workshop, you can have a guest speaker of some other related profession, and that might attract more clients.
You get invited to speak to a lot of these.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And we always accept, as small as the audience may be. You know, sometimes they're as small as 12 people, and sometimes they're as large as 60, 70 people, right?
Exactly. And you know, think about this. A lot of this stuff works together, gang. So if you're doing a paper with somebody else, right, why not talk about that paper? You know, if it's a paper that's more directed towards potential clients, you could use that paper as a resource in a joint client workshop. If it's a paper that's geared more towards other professionals, you can use that paper as the springboard to talk to other professionals. So, you know, think about this in the sense that it's not one or the other or a third. You know, you can use all these together.
Now, this is a topic, Craig, that I happen to love. I was a part of this particular team as you're putting this together. You know, we're working on a business succession plan process, right? That involves several different groups.
Different related professions.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a lot, because that was very exciting. I just found it fascinating that we were able to provide, you know, what this particular group was already doing for their clients, but we put it into a process and a system.
Exactly. You know, what I was talking about earlier with regard to your process, you know, it's easier to sell a process than it is a commodity, okay? This is how we do this. So we have a process already for our estate planning, which is called the Family Estate Legacy Program. Again, you can go to forfreedompractice.com to see these. We have another process that we use for estate settlement, whether it's a probate or a trust, and that's called the Estate Settlement Program. And I've trademarked and registered trademarked these processes. Now, like you said, what we're working on now is a business succession process. And we're working on with some related professionals. You know, there's investment bankers that bring things to the game that we don't bring. CPAs, you know, compliance professionals, consultants, financial planners, insurance professionals. I mean, in a business succession plan, you may need valuation specialists. You may have all sorts of collaborative opportunities to actually use your services, use their services, and again, this is
contribute.
Yeah.
And collaborate.
Well, this is where 1 + 1 = 3.
Absolutely.
Or in this case, you know, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 rather than 5 or 4 or whatever it is. So creating a collaborative, unique process is really kind of neat. Now, this takes work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And you're also talking about coordination and mentioning all of the things that each discipline, as you mentioned, you know, finds that is important to be a part of that process. So absolutely, it is a lot of work.
Now, finally, you know, many of us are in charitable and civic events. One of the law partners that my mentors, the name of my firm is Shepherd, Brett Stewart, Hurst, Kinsey & Hill. It used to be Shepherd and Woolslayer. My firm started in 1924. It's always been a small boutique law firm. But John Shepherd, who's my mentor, he's been retired now. He brought me in as a young... By the way, the paper that I talked about that I wrote with Alan Gassman is the paper that I taught. I was with another firm in town. I was doing a presentation to other lawyers. John Shepherd was attending that presentation with a CPA that I won't name because she doesn't want to know that, that she was involved with that because she didn't want to upset some of her other referral sources. But she introduced John Shepherd. That's how I landed in this firm 27 years ago. But in any event, you know, he helped start what's called the Southwest Florida Community Foundation. So our firm has always had close ties to the Southwest Florida Community Foundation. Well, you can imagine that there's a lot of other firms associated with the Southwest Florida Community Foundation. So whether it's, and we've done, what, Alzheimer walks before?
Yeah, we try. I mean, you know, we want to be involved in the community, and that's only, you know, you put your name out there and people are suddenly aware and they understand that you want to give back, you know.
So, you know, here's an idea. What about this idea? So, you know, you want to partner with another one of your centers of influence and you're all going to do a cancer walk together. And you invite both client bases. Well, you know, that's a feel-good thing for your clients. That's a feel-good thing for you.
And you never know. You might get to know some of them and vice versa, right?
Yeah. So, these are just some of the ideas I've come up with for you to destroy this quid pro quo mindset. Maria, what do you think? Are we outside of the quid pro quo with all of this?
Oh, I definitely, well, that's not the way we think, and like you said in the middle here, I think the client ultimately feels the fact that we're doing what's best for the client.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with what's best for either party, right? It shouldn't. It's really what's best for that client.
And, the theme of everything we're talking about here is when you give, you end up receiving. Yeah. But when you're only worried about receiving, you end up not receiving.
And you know what? It also says you are relationship based. That's who you are. It speaks to your client. It tells your client where your mindset is. Your mindset as the legal advice provider. And I think it says good things about you.
Yeah, and I'm sure that everybody listening here is doing these things.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just a matter of, okay, now I'm trying to give you all a frame of reference that you can use now to kind of channel the things you're already doing to find even greater success.
Right.
To make an even bigger future for yourself. So let's think about our thinking a little bit before we turn it over to questions. So, I think it's always good to end with our takeaways. What do you think, Maria?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are some of our biggest takeaways here? Not only do we want our centers of influence to overcome the quid pro quo mindset, but we must also do that ourselves, right?
Yeah, I think it starts with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it starts with us, then it's going to bleed over to the ones that we deal or we work with. And if it doesn't, well, then they might not be
the right fit.
The right fit anyway. So to move away from quid pro quo, let's move away from this transactional mentality.
Right, which also you want to open the door to constructive dialogue with your centers of influence to demonstrate your value. I love that one because honestly, you're providing a resource and a service to them that probably they can't get anywhere else, and they're going to see you as being a giver, right?
And by the way, even if they can't get it from other lawyers, that's okay too. Yeah. There's enough room for everybody. I'm friends with many of our competitors here in town. There's some really good board-certified wills, trusts, and estates attorneys, and they do some good work, and they do some good things, and why not?
Right.
Don't have, my main piece of advice to anybody watching today is not to come away with a scarcity mindset. If you have an abundance mindset, the world becomes more abundant to you. And then finally, build solid relationships going forward that use them to distinguish yourself as a community leader. You do these things, and believe me, gang, it'll all come to you.
Yeah, the word gets around, and it leads to good things.
Yeah. So, Susan, that's really what we had for everybody today. I don't know if there's any questions that you want us to answer.
Sure, we have some questions. But first, just to add to something Craig said earlier about people who are interested in writing for trust and estates, in addition to the seminar that we do at Hecker Lane, if you can't make it to Hecker Lane, we do have a webinar that we've done, How to Write for Trust and Estates, which is archived on our website. So if you're interested in that, it's very easy to access, and it will give you all our tips about article proposals and what happens if your article is accepted for publication. So feel free to go and listen to that. But now let's start on some of the questions. Craig, you suggested conducting joint workshops with your centers of influence. If I'm a lawyer and I conduct a workshop with a financial firm, how do you determine who gets the list of who attends? Who do you invite? You don't want the attendees bombarded by both offices afterwards. What do you do there?
Yeah, that's a very important question because you want to be careful of your ethical rules. Lawyers have a duty of confidentiality. So I think it's important before you start to share lists that you make sure that you're not violating any attorney-client confidentialities of who you represent. In those cases, what we've done in the past is we've had where we send out invitations on our and then maybe a financial planner, CPA, will send out other invitations, and we don't share the list for the reason that we don't want to violate confidences. So that's one thing to do. But yeah, you should be very much aware of those things. Now, who do you invite? Again, that speaks to what is the workshop about, or what is the event?
The topic.
What's the topic, or is it a community event? In which case you're going to invite probably most everybody. Is it more of an event that would be specific to a certain group of people? And then you don't want everybody bombarded afterwards from both firms. So you're going to have to talk about, and again, this is all intentionality. We want to make sure that we talk a lot with each other, with our centers of influence, about what the expectations are about who's going to contact whom afterwards.
Okay, then the next question is, how might you market a joint workshop to potential clients?
Yeah, and that speaks to what field you're in and what your compliance issues are. But certainly there's any number of ways to do that today, whether through an email campaign and
direct mail.
Direct mail is always a great thing. You want to make sure that we just did a what we called a birds of a feather dinner in our office, where what we did is we invited clients to a dinner at a country club, and we asked them to bring their friends.
Right.
And that was a great thing, and you could certainly you can co-brand that with a financial planner, someone like that, and so those are the sorts of things. You can do email, you can do Facebook, you can do direct mail.
Yeah, one that always works out for us is, believe it or not, just newspaper inserts. They love newspaper inserts, at least in our area. They will always walk in going, I'm looking for this workshop for today. So that always works here.
Yeah.
Are there any ethical issues that we need to be concerned about when conducting workshops?
Yeah, I alluded to that a little earlier. We want to make sure that we're careful when we're sharing client lists, of course. We want to be careful of confidentiality concerns. The Florida Bar, I'm a member of the Florida Bar. They have certain rules about promising results in your advertisements. If you send out a direct mailing and it is not to existing clients or people who have already opted in Florida, we have a requirement that we actually stamp the word advertisement on the bottom of the envelope in a bold color. I think it has to be in red. I have to go back and read the rule again. And also on the inside, the inserts must also be stamped with the word advertisement. And I was just at a marketing workshop actually that Brian Kurtz, he's a former Madison Avenue marketing executive, and he has something called Titans Marketing. And if any of you are interested in that, he conducts Titans marketing workshops that I highly recommend. We were in Cleveland a week or two ago, and Dan Kennedy, GKIC, or I hate to use this word, but this is his word, the no bullshit marketing system, he calls it. And he has a new book out, Magnetic Marketing.
Yeah, which is incredible.
It's incredible. Dan Kennedy spoke to us about these issues, and you really good information, gang. I would highly recommend that you get these books or attend these workshops. But always, 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 you want to check with your compliance departments, and you want to read the ethical rules that you're governed by. And in Florida, for example, we have to send in our proposed advertisements either contemporaneous to or before we use them to get approval. So I can't speak to all the ethical issues because we have various disciplines here listening today, and we have various other state. All states have different rules. So just make sure that you're familiar with your rules and that you look. And by the way, don't ever let your advertising, if you're using an advertising firm, don't rely on them that they've read this stuff. You better read it and make sure to. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next question. You indicated that considering referrals as transactional is a bad thing, but aren't we in the transaction business? I don't understand how we can't have both transactions and relationships.
Yeah, that's a good question. Transactions, to me at least, is a bad word. It's just a bad word because transactions in today's world are all commoditized. Think about it. Airline tickets, hotel reservations, buying books, buying almost anything that you can buy on Amazon. Now buying groceries, always transactional, and that's now bleeding into the legal, tax, and financial realm. We're all becoming transactional. So to me, transaction, yeah, you can have a transaction, but that's not really what we're after. I don't see how you can charge a premium fee when you're doing a transaction.
Yeah, I agree. Transactional to me means you can get it anywhere. It doesn't matter who's providing that service.
It's a commodity, and price is the only differentiating factor.
That's right.
And most of us who are listening here today, we're usually the top. We're the guys who are charging more. So we have to have a relationship-based practice. And what I'm trying to say today is it extends beyond the transaction with the client or the transaction. Quid pro quo is a transaction with the center of influence. We don't want those. We want relationships.
Okay, the next question is, I have my go-to referral network. Am I limiting myself? How do I expand it without alienating my existing network?
Yeah, that's always a concern. We have our go-tos. We have our centers of influence that we use all the time. I alluded to earlier in the webinar here that some of my go-tos were retiring on me. So, Maria, you introduced me to a young CPA, right?
Yeah, he's actually my CPA. And he's, young and up and coming and very aggressive about going after new business, and I think it'll be a good relationship.
So in answer to this question, I think you do limit yourself somewhat when you just stay within your go-to realm. But of course, if it works for you, you don't want to break something or don't fix it if it's not broken, sort of thing. So all I'm saying here is I would just be mindful of what's that relationship look like, how might it be taken to the next level, and then also mindful of, is there a way to expand it? And again, I wouldn't worry too much. I realize that a lot of attorneys, there's a lot of other estate planning attorneys, and every now and then one of my referral sources is going to send somebody to one of my competitors. That's okay. And if you have an abundance mindset, it's okay. So that's my answer to that.
All right, well, it looks like we have answered all the questions. So again, I'd like to thank Craig Hirsch and Maria Reimer for their outstanding presentation. As a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email that will include a link to view a recording of today's presentation. If you found this event useful, please encourage your colleagues to register and subscribe at our special introductory rate so they can also enjoy exclusive programs like this one. Once you leave this event, a short survey will pop up in your browser window. We'd appreciate it if you would share your feedback on this event, as it helps us to provide you with content that's most interesting for you. On behalf of Trust and Estates, have a great remainder of the day.
Thank you.